If you want to be effective in the world, effective being in quotes, it is useful when in very dynamic environments, especially social environments, to have a lot of your attention focused outward. What is it when we feel something? It's clear from most all of the theories of emotional health that an ability to recognize when your own internal state is being driven primarily by external events as important for being able to emotionally regulate, right? People who are constantly being yanked around by the external happenings in the world, you would say are emotionally labile. They are not in control of their emotions. Even if they're calm all the time, if that calmness only arrives because they're in a placid environment and then you put, a cracker in that environment and they freak out, well, then they're not really calm. They're calm insofar as there isn't something disturbing in the environment. So how much the outside environment disrupts your internal environment has everything to do with this balance of interoception and exteroception. And it very likely has roots in whether or not you were secure attached or insecure attached, disorganized or ambivalent as a baby. Now, of course, you can't travel back in time and know, but there are some hints as to what kind of emotionality each of us has by examining two periods of development. One is adolescence and puberty, and the other is adulthood. So while we can't travel back in time, there is an exercise that you can do to address, at least in this moment, whether or not you have a bias for exteroception or a bias for interoception. Whether or not you are better, at least in this moment, at paying attention to what's going on internally or externally. And of course, this will vary with circumstance. I think we all know people that, maybe it's you go to a party and you get there and everyone seems to be talking and having a really good time, and you're wondering whether or not you have any food in your teeth, or whether or not there's something on your face, or whether or not your hair is right, or whether or not you said something the wrong way, whether or not you're turning red. People also experience this a lot with public speaking. And it's not just about learning to clamp your level of stress. It's also about how much you're exterocepting, how much you're out of your head, how much you're focused on the events around you versus the events inside you. Actually, it's interesting when you talk to people who are very effective athletes, or they have very high stress, high consequence jobs, they talk about this notion of, getting out of your head. You only have so much attentional resource, and it can be split between two things. You'll see that in a moment. It can be anchored to one thing. It can be fully focused on what's going on internally, or it can be fully focused on what's going on externally. And if you want to be effective in the world, effective being in quotes, it is useful when in very dynamic environments, especially social environments, to have a lot of your attention focused outward, as opposed to trying to pay attention to whether or not you're saying things correctly or the timbre of your own voice. That is more or less destructive for the ability to engage socially. So here's the exercise. If you close your eyes right now and concentrate on the contact of any portion of your body with, say, the chair, anywhere that you are, even if you're just standing up or you're in the kitchen, or you're lying on the couch, and trying to bring as much of your attention to that point of contact as possible. And then from there, you're going to move your attention even more deeply into, say, the sensation of what's going on in your gut. Are you full? Are you empty? Are you hungry? Are you not? Is your heart beating? At what rate? What's the cadence of your breathing? Basically bringing your focus and attention to everything at the surface of your skin and inward. I'm going to introduce about 5 to 8 seconds of silence in order to allow you to do that a little bit. Okay. Now, this is an exercise that you can continue afterward if you want to extend how long you do this. But now try and do something that for most people actually is a little bit harder, which is to purely exterocept. Put your eyes or your ears or both on anything in your immediate space. One thing. And I would restrict that thing to something small enough that at least in your field of view, it would occupy, 20% of your field of views. I would say look across the room, pick a panel on the wall or a leg of a table or something, and try and bring as much of your attention to that as possible. And again, I'll take about 5 seconds of silence to allow you to exterocept. Okay, so what you probably found is that you were able to do that, but that some degree of interoception is maintained. It's hard to place 100% of your attention on something externally unless it's really exciting, really novel. If you've ever watched a really great movie, presumably you're exterocepting more than you're interocepting until something exciting happens, and then you feel something. You're actually tethering your emotional experience to something external. And now you can also do this dynamically. You can decide to focus internally and then externally. You can decide to split it 50%, or 70-30. You can develop a heightened ability to do this. And the power of doing that is actually that when you are in environments where you feel like you're focused too much internally and you'd like to be focused more externally, you can actually do that deliberately. But as you notice, it takes work. It involves taking your attentional spotlight and what we call the aperture of your attention and narrowing that aperture to either the self or something externally, or splitting the two. And yet there are practices that have been developed that center on moving interoception and exteroception from one being more heavily weighted than the other, more focused outward or more focused inward. And it's dynamic. And the circuits in the brain that underlie intero and exteroception aren't exactly known, but they are anchored in the areas of the brain that are involved in attention, like the frontal eye fields, and areas that when you third person yourself, when you can see yourself doing something, like if you put your hand out in your environment and you focus on your hand, you know that that's your hand as opposed to some random object. There are areas of the brain that are involved in that, in recognizing location of self relative to the rest of your body. These exercises are really what are at the core of these development of emotional bonds. So if somebody winks at you, you're paying attention to their wink, but then you also notice how you feel. Then they might say something, then you might say something. This is very dynamic. So if it seems overwhelming to try and interocept and exterocept and then shift the balance, you do that all the time. Your brain and nervous system are fantastic at doing this.